Where are your parents?
She found the boy before anyone even knew he was missing, and by the time his father found them both, nothing in either of their lives would ever be the same again. The first thing Chidera Egwu noticed about the boy was that he was sitting directly in front of the animatronic giraffe display like it owed him money. Not standing. Not passing by with a distracted glance the way most children did. Sitting. Cross-legged on the cold mall floor, yellow dinosaur backpack still strapped to his back, chin tilted at a precise upward angle, watching the giraffe with the focused, unblinking intensity of a scientist observing a critical experiment. The giraffe blinked its enormous mechanical eyes. The boy nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. Chidera had been restocking the accessories kiosk directly across from a display, a task made significantly more complicated by the fact that her co-worker Park Si-yun had reorganized the entire earring section again, apparently in a system based on nothing that existed in the physical world, and she had been watching the boy for approximately 4 minutes now with the growing suspicion that something was off. He was too still. Too unbothered. Too alone. Every other child in the vicinity was attached to at least one adult, dragging said adult in various directions, performing the standard issue mall tantrum or the standard issue mall sugar spiral. This particular child was attached to nothing and no one, perfectly contained in his own world, and had been for long enough that Chidera had gone from mildly curious to quietly concerned. She set down the earring tray, stepped around the kiosk counter, and walked over to him. She crouched down to his level, the way her mother had always crouched down when she wanted a child to actually listen instead of just staring up at a faraway adult face. "Hello, little man," she said in Korean, keeping her voice easy and warm. "That giraffe is very impressive, yes?" The boy turned to look at her. He had the most direct eyes she had ever seen on a small child, ink dark, completely serious, with lashes that were honestly criminal and a small comma-shaped birthmark above his left eyebrow that somehow made his whole face look like it had been carefully designed by someone with very particular taste. He looked at her face. He looked at her hair. He looked at her name tag. He returned to her face. "Your skin is very shiny," he said. Chidera blinked. "Thank you." "Like the good chocolates," he added, in the clarifying tone of someone who wants to make sure their compliment lands correctly. "The ones in the gold box. Not the cheap ones." "That is the most specific compliment I have ever received," Chidera said. "I will keep it forever." The boy appeared satisfied. He turned back to the giraffe. "He blinks every 45 seconds, he announced. "I have been counting." "He does," Chidera confirmed. "I have worked across from him for 2 years. I know his entire schedule." The boy looked at her again with renewed respect. "Then you are his friend." "His closest friend," she agreed. "He tells me things." "What does he say?" "Mostly he talks about the small children who sit in front of him without telling anyone where they are." She kept her tone light, watching his face carefully. "He worries about them." Something flickered across the boy's expression, a brief, involuntary thing, gone as quickly as it arrived. He straightened his small shoulders. "I told my APPA where I was going," he said, with approximately 70% conviction. Chidera looked at him. He looked at the giraffe. The giraffe blinked. "Did your APPA hear you when you told him?" she asked. A pause. A very telling pause. "He was on the phone," the boy said. "But I told him." "I see." Chidera sat down fully on the floor beside him, which made her feel ridiculous in her work uniform but which she understood was the correct move. "You did not interrogate small children from above. You came down to their level and you waited. And where is your APPA now?" The boy pointed in the general direction of the toy display on the other side of the level 3 walkway. "Over there." Chidera looked. There were approximately 40 people over there. None of them appeared to be actively searching for a missing child, which meant either the father had not yet noticed the boy was gone, or, and this was the more concerning possibility, he had noticed and was already somewhere else entirely. "What is your APPA's name?" she asked. "APPA," the boy said, as if this were self-evident. "His other name. The one other people call him." The boy considered this. Hyan Wu. Kang Hyan Wu. He paused. "Also some people at his office call him Sir and some people call him Chairman Kang, but Halmoni calls him that boy even though he is very tall." "Your grandmother sounds like an excellent person," Chidera said. "She is the best person, the boy agreed, with the loyalty of someone who has clearly been well supplied with snacks. Her name is Soon-hee. She says what she means always. APPA says that is a gift and also sometimes a problem. Chidera was charmed entirely against her will. She pressed on. And what is your name, little man? He turned to her with the gravity of someone making a formal introduction. Kang Eun-woo, he said. I am 4 years old. I can write my name in Korean and in English and almost in Chinese, but the Chinese ones are still a little crooked. A beat. What is your name? Chidera. Chidera Egwoo. Eun-woo received this information with full seriousness. His small mouth moved, testing the syllables with care. Kai, de, ra. He looked at her. That is beautiful. Thank you. Where is it from? Nigeria. It is an Igbo name. It means God is doing great things. Eun-woo absorbed this. My name means grace and excellence, he offered. APPA chose it. He spent a very long time choosing. He paused, and something shifted behind his eyes, a small, brief cloud passing over an otherwise clear sky. He wanted it to be perfect because my Ioma was not there to help pick. The words landed quietly. Chidera did not flinch, but she felt them. Your Ioma is not with you, she asked, gently. She went to heaven when I was born, Eun-woo said. He said it with the particular matter-of-factness of a child who had been given a true and careful answer to a hard question very early, and had decided to carry it with dignity rather than confusion. APPA says she is always watching. I think she probably watches me and the giraffe together sometimes. Chidera looked at this boy, 4 years old, sitting on a mall floor, speaking about heaven and grace and a mother he had never met with more composure than most adults could manage, and felt something move in her chest that she had no immediate category for. She would be very proud of you, Chidera said. I have known you for 6 minutes and I am already impressed. Eun-woo smiled. It was his father's bone structure doing something completely different. Open, bright, unguarded, the kind of smile that made nearby strangers feel like they had been unexpectedly gifted something. You are nice, he told her. I like you. I like you too, she said. Now, should we go and find your APPA before he finds you first and has a heart attack on the mall floor? Because I have seen full-grown adults cause traffic problems in this building, and I do not have the bandwidth for that today. Eun-woo giggled, a sudden, real, delighted sound, and stood up, brushing non-existent dust from his dinosaur backpack with the brisk efficiency of a child who has decided to cooperate fully. He held out his hand to Chidera. Not tentatively. Not shyly. Openly. The way children extend trust before the world has spent years convincing them that trust should be rationed. She took it. They did not make it 3 steps. The scream came from the direction of the toy display, and it was not the scream of a man who was mildly concerned. It was not the scream of a man who had looked up from his phone, noticed a brief absence, and was doing a sensible sweep of the nearby area. It was the scream of a man whose entire nervous system had been running a silent catastrophic simulation for the past 4 minutes, and had just reached its worst possible conclusion. EUNWO. The voice was deep, Korean, and carrying the specific frequency of raw parental terror that does not translate or require translation. It meant the same thing in every language, in every country, on every floor of every mall on Earth. Eun-woo's hand tightened around Chidera's fingers. That is APPA, he said, with the air of someone confirming the obvious. I gathered, Chidera said. And then the crowd parted. Not politely, not gradually, but in the instant reflexive way that crowds part when something large and sufficiently urgent is moving through them, and Kang Hyun-woo came into view. Chidera's first thought, which she would later be embarrassed about, was, he is absurdly tall. Her second thought, which followed approximately half a second behind the first, was, this man is absolutely falling apart. He was wearing a charcoal suit that she would later learn cost more than she earned in 3 months. His tie was loosened. His hair, which was the kind of dark that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, had clearly been run through by a hand in distress at least twice in the recent past. 2 enormous men in black flanked him, bodyguards, she registered, filing that detail for later, and they were doing the practiced, invisible kind of hovering that security professionals do when their principal is in a state and they are professionally obligated to pretend everything is fine. Nothing was fine. Hyun-woo's face was the face of a man who had looked away for 30 seconds, and returned to find the world had rearranged itself into something he could not survive. His eyes were moving, fast, methodical, sweeping every face in the crowd, every gap between bodies, every corner and bench and storefront, in the controlled pattern of someone who was using training to override panic because the alternative was simply not available to him. He had done this before, Chidera understood. Not this specific thing, but the management of loss. The technique of continuing to function while something inside was screaming. He was very good at it. He was also very close to the edge of it. EUNWOO. APPA is here, EUNWO, please. Apa. Unwoo released Chidera's hand and became, briefly, a small yellow backpack projectile. The crowd had just enough time to register what was happening before the boy crossed the distance between them at a full 4-year-old sprint and collided with his father's legs with a force that was not small. Hyun-woo went to his knees. Not because the impact knocked him down. He went to his knees the way a person goes to their knees when the thing they have been bracing against finally stops pushing, and the relief of it removes every structural element that was holding them upright. He caught Eun-woo in both arms and pulled the boy against his chest and stayed there, suit on the mall floor, bodyguards suddenly fascinated by the middle distance, the entire watching crowd suddenly needing to look at other things, and held his son with the particular desperation of a person relearning how to breathe. Eun-woo patted the back of his father's head with both hands. This was, Chidera thought, the most gentle and devastating thing she had ever witnessed inside a shopping mall. APPA, the boy said, patiently, the way children address adults who are being slightly excessive but in a forgivable way. APPA, I am okay. I was with the giraffe. And also Chidera. She is the giraffe's best friend. She knows his secrets. A sound came from Hyun-woo that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob and was instead something that existed in the narrow, complicated territory between them where adults go when they are overwhelmed and also deeply relieved, and also a small child is currently describing a mechanical giraffe's social life. He lifted his face. The bodyguards were still very interested in the ceiling. The crowd had developed a collective case of extremely urgent business elsewhere. Chidera was standing approximately 2 meters away with her hands folded in front of her, giving him the privacy of not looking directly at him, which was its own kind of looking. She found me, Eun-woo supplied helpfully, pulling back from his father's chest just far enough to point at her with full directional accuracy. I was sitting with the giraffe and she came and sat with me and asked where you were, and I told her, and then we were coming to find you, but you found us first. He paused. You were very loud, APPA. I was very loud, Hyun-woo agreed. His voice had the texture of something that had been through significant weather in the last 10 minutes. The giraffe probably heard you, Eun-woo said. He has big ears. I will apologize to the giraffe later. He will understand, Eun-woo said generously. He is a good giraffe. Hyun-woo looked up at Chidera. She had been looked at many ways in her 26 years on this earth. She had been looked at with the polite confusion of people who had not expected to encounter her in certain spaces. She had been looked at with the careful, measuring assessment of people deciding how to categorize her. She had been looked at with the breezy dismissal of people who had already decided she was not worth the assessment. She had been looked at, once, by a man she had briefly believed loved her, and that look had ultimately turned out to be a reflection of what he wanted rather than who she was. Kang Hyun-woo looked at her like she was the first real thing he had seen clearly in a very long time. She felt it in her sternum, which was inconvenient. You stayed with him, Hyun-woo said. It was not quite a question. He was alone, she said. And he is 4. Those two facts in combination require action. You found him before anyone called security. I noticed him before anyone knew he was missing. I work across from that giraffe. I know every child who stops in front of it, and I know how long they usually stay. She kept her voice practical, because practical was what this man needed right now, not sentiment. He had been sitting there too long. So I went and sat with him. Hyun-woo stood up from the floor, one arm still curved around Eun-woo's back, and the full height of him was genuinely unreasonable. Chidera was not a small woman, but he recalibrated the space around him. He looked at her steadily. I don't know how to. He stopped. His jaw tightened. She watched him try again. There are no words in any language that are the right size for what I want to say to you right now. So I will only say, thank you. And I will mean it more than those words usually mean. You are welcome, she said. More than those words usually mean. Something shifted in his expression, very slight, like a door opening one careful inch. APPA, Eun-woo said. tugging his father's jacket lapel with the decisive energy of someone who has been patient long enough. Ask her name. Halmoni says we always ask people their names. She says it is how you show a person they are real to you and not just a background. Hyan Wu looked at his son. Then he looked at Chidera. My son and my mother are apparently running my social education, he said, and there it was, not a full smile, but the shadow of one, the structural suggestion of what a smile from this man might look like if it ever came fully out. What is your name? Chidera, she said. Chidera Egwu. Un-Wu, still held against his father's side, pointed at her as though confirming a discovery. I already know. Kaidara. I learned it. I am going to practice it every day until it is perfect. You said that to me already, she told him. I meant it both times, he said seriously. It was at this precise moment that the atmosphere of the reunion was comprehensively destroyed. Egwu. The name arrived before the man did, which was standard operational procedure for Mr. Bark, whose voice had always been faster than his body and considerably faster than his judgment. He emerged from the direction of the accessories kiosk at a pace that was technically a walk but had the emotional content of a full sprint. He was a compact man, not short, precisely, but constructed in a way that suggested all available height had been redistributed into grievance. His lanyard was swinging. His clipboard was raised at an angle that in another century would have constituted a threat. His face had achieved the particular shade of red that Chidera privately catalogued as Stage 3, prehistorical. I have been standing at that kiosk for 11 minutes, he announced, to Chidera, to the crowd, to the general concept of workplace accountability. 11 minutes with no staff, merchandise unsupervised, customers asking me, Emmy, the supervisor, where the earrings are, as if my job is to. He appeared to lose the sentence entirely in his own outrage. You left your post, Egwu. You left your post without permission, without notifying anyone. You just walked away. I was with a lost child, Chidera said, in the measured tone she used when she was determined not to match his frequency. That is not your job. Mr. Bark said. Your job is the kiosk. The kiosk is your job. Security handles lost children. That is what security is paid to do. You are paid to handle earrings. Mr. Bark. The voice was quiet. Very, very quiet. The specific kind of quiet that does not indicate the absence of force but rather the precise, deliberate compression of it, the difference between a river and a dam. Mr. Bark stopped mid-sentence as though someone had reached into the conversation and removed the electricity from it. Hyan Wu had not moved from where he was standing. He had not raised his voice. He had not changed his expression. He was simply looking at Mr. Bark with the particular quality of attention that belongs exclusively to people who have spent years being the most consequential person in every room they enter, and have learned that the only volume required is the one that makes other people very aware of theirs. Mr. Bark looked at Hyan Wu. He looked at the two enormous men in black flanking Hyan Wu. He looked at Hyan Wu's suit, which was communicating several pieces of financial information simultaneously. He looked at the way the surrounding crowd had subtly reorganized itself in relation to Hyan Wu, the way water reorganizes itself around something with significant mass. Mr. Bark's clipboard lowered approximately 45 degrees. This woman, Hyan Wu said, with the unhurried precision of someone reading a verdict, sat with my son on the floor of this mall for the entire duration of the time he was separated from me. She did not wait for security. She did not wait for an announcement. She noticed a child who was alone and she stayed with him and she kept him calm, and because of her, what could have become a very serious situation ended with my son safe and unfrightened. He paused. I would be interested to hear more about the problem you are describing. The pause that followed this was long enough to be geologically significant. Mr. Bark's mouth opened. Mr. Bark's mouth closed. Mr. Bark's face journeyed through an extraordinary sequence of expressions, beginning at righteous indignation, passing through dawning recalculation, making a brief stop at something that looked like recognition, and arriving at a final destination that Chidera could only describe as a man trying very hard to look like someone who had never raised his voice in his life. Of course, Mr. Bark said, in a voice that had been entirely rebuilt from the ground up. Of course. Egwu performed. Yes. Commendably. Yes. Good work, Egwu. He walked away. Not quickly. He was careful not to walk away quickly. He walked away at the deliberate, steady pace of a man who is maintaining full dignity, and always has been, and anyone who suggests otherwise will be hearing from his lawyer. Chidera watched his retreating back. She was going to pay for this. She was absolutely going to pay for this, because Mr. Bark was the kind of man who kept a running tab on every humiliation and presented the bill at the most inconvenient possible moment. She had 8 months of evidence to support this conclusion. But right now, watching the particular quality of his walk, the extra stiffness in the shoulders, the over-controlled swing of the clipboard, she felt the specific, rare, deeply satisfying feeling of a woman who has just watched the correct thing happen in a world where the correct thing was not always on the schedule. Beside her, Eunwoo watched Mr. Bark go with the frank assessment of a child who has decided he does not like someone and sees no reason to pretend otherwise. "That man is not nice," he observed. "That man is my supervisor," Chidera said. "That is not fair," Eunwoo said, with genuine indignation on her behalf. "Many things are not fair," she told him. "But you learn to handle them and keep going." She crouched down to his level. "And you, Mr. Kang Eunwoo, need to stay next to your APPA at all times in this building, even when the giraffe is calling your name. Deal?" Eunwoo considered the terms. "Can I visit the giraffe when APPA is with me?" "Absolutely." "Then it is a deal." He stuck out his hand with the solemnity of a diplomat signing a treaty. She shook it. He beamed. Hyunwoo was watching this exchange with an expression that Chidera could not fully read because she was being careful not to look at him directly for too long, the way you are careful not to look at the sun for too long, not because it is dangerous exactly, but because you know instinctively that if you look at it long enough it will change what you can see afterward. "I should return to my kiosk," she said, straightening up, "before Mr. Bark finds new reasons to add to his collection." Chidera. Her name in his mouth had a different weight than it did anywhere else. She was not going to think about that. "Will you be all right? With him?" "I am always all right," she said. "I have been all right in this city with considerably less support than I currently have and in considerably more difficult situations than a small man with a clipboard. I have developed an immune response." The corner of his mouth moved again. Definitely moved. She clocked it and filed it and told herself firmly to stop. "Eunwoo," Hyunwoo said, looking at his son. "Say goodbye to Chidera." Eunwoo looked up at her with the directness that had characterized every single thing he had done since she sat down beside him on the mall floor. "I will come back," he announced. "With APPA. To see the giraffe. And also you." "I will be here," she said. "You said the giraffe is always here," Eunwoo said. "Are you also always here? Like the giraffe?" "I am here 6 days a week," she confirmed. "We are both very reliable." Eunwoo nodded, satisfied, and extended his hand upward to his father without looking, with the unconscious confidence of a child who has never once reached for that hand and found it absent. Hyunwoo took it. He looked at Chidera one more time. The look lasted exactly long enough to mean something and not long enough to acknowledge that it meant something, which was its own very specific kind of communication. "Thank you," he said. "For everything that word is not big enough to hold." She nodded. She did not trust her voice to be as steady as she wanted it to be. They left. The bodyguards fell into formation. The crowd rearranged itself in the casual, collective amnesia of people who had just witnessed something private and were pretending they hadn't. The giraffe blinked. Chidera stood still for a moment. Then she walked back to the kiosk, located the missing earring tray, still where Si-yeon had relocated it, because Si-yeon was an agent of controlled chaos with excellent intentions, put it back in its correct position, and stood with her hands flat on the counter and stared at the giraffe across the walkway. Her heart was doing something. She was categorizing it as adrenaline. Post-incident adrenaline. She had just spent 20 minutes managing a missing child situation and a supervisor confrontation and a man who looked at her like she was the first clear thing in a room full of fog. It was entirely reasonable that her cardiovascular system was behaving unusually. This was adrenaline. She was going with adrenaline. The giraffe blinked, slowly, as if it had an opinion about this. "Not a word," she told it. In the car park on level B2, a long black car idled beside the payment machines while a bodyguard who had been professionally impassive through the entire episode held the rear door open with the expression of a man who had also seen things but was contractually obligated to have seen nothing. Hyunwoo buckled Eunwoo into his car seat. It was a task he had performed approximately 1,500 times in 4 years, and he did it on muscle memory while his mind was somewhere else entirely. Back on the 3rd floor, standing in front of a woman with a work badge and steady eyes and a voice that had not wavered once through the entire afternoon. "APPA," Eunwoo said, while the buckle clicked. "Yes." Chidera's name means God is doing great things. Hyunwoo paused. She told you that? I asked. I ask people what their names mean. Halmoni says names are important and we should treat them that way. He settled back into his seat with the satisfaction of a child reviewing a successful day. Also APPA, she said I am impressive. She said she has known me 6 minutes and she is already impressed. 6 minutes, Hyunwoo repeated. I think it is because I know about the giraffe, Eunwoo said generously. And also because I am excellent at conversation. You are 4 years old. I am 4 years old and excellent at conversation, Eunwoo said. Both things are true at the same time, APPA. Halmoni says that is called nuance. Hyunwoo sat back in his seat. Outside, Seoul moved past the tinted windows in the blurred watercolor way it moved when you were not paying attention to it. He was not paying attention to it. He was thinking about a woman who had noticed a child was alone before anyone else had. Who had sat down on a cold mall floor in her work uniform without hesitation, because the child was alone and the child was 4, and those 2 facts were apparently sufficient reason. Who had handled his security team's panic more efficiently than his security team, and silenced his son's terrible supervisor with 3 sentences that she herself did not seem to register as remarkable. Who had said, I am always all right. The way people say things that are completely true and also contain something they have decided not to examine. He recognized it because he said things like that too. He had been saying things like that for 4 years. APPA, Eunwoo said, already drowsy, the way children went from fully operational to immediately asleep with no intermediate stage. Are we going to go back and see Chidera? We will see the giraffe again, Hyunwoo said, which was not quite an answer. Same thing, Eunwoo said, and fell asleep. Hyunwoo looked at his son's face in the rearview mirror. The birthmark above the left eyebrow. The lashes resting against his cheek. The complete, total, devastating vulnerability of a sleeping child who trusted that the world would hold still until he woke up. He looked at it for a long time. Then he took out his phone and asked his assistant to identify the mall management company for Lotta World, because he had a meeting he wanted to arrange, and he always did his due diligence before meetings, and this one was going to require some preparation. This was not personal. This was simply a professional matter. He was an excellent liar when he needed to be. 4 years of practice. The city blurred past outside. In the mall above them, a woman who was going with adrenaline rearranged the same 3 rings 4 times and had a one-sided conversation with a blinking giraffe. Neither of them slept particularly well that night. Strange things were happening at Lotta World Mall. Problems Chidera had not reported were being solved. Enemies she had not confronted were being silenced. And somewhere above her, on level 4, a man in a dark coat was pretending very hard to be on a phone call. The thing about Kang Hyunwoo was that he was meticulous. This was not simply a personality trait. It was an operational philosophy, a survival mechanism, a way of moving through the world that had been developed carefully over 35 years and reinforced significantly over the last 4. When you lost something you could not replace, you did not leave other things to chance. You studied. You prepared. You arrived at situations already knowing the exit routes. He had lost his wife on a Tuesday in October, 4 years ago, at 4:47 in the morning, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and flowers that someone had brought too early and that had already begun to wilt. He had been holding her hand. He had not let go for 3 hours afterward, not because he did not understand what had happened, but because letting go felt like the first step in a direction he was not ready to go. He had eventually let go, because Eunwoo was crying and Eunwoo needed him and Eunwoo was, in every practical sense, the reason he had stood up from that chair and walked back into a world that had just rearranged itself permanently. He did not talk about this. He managed it. He was very good at managing things. He was considerably less good, it was turning out, at managing the particular and inconvenient problem of Chidera Egwu. He told himself, on the drive home from the mall, that his interest was gratitude. Clean, proportionate, explicable gratitude. She had sat with his son on a cold floor and stayed with him and kept him calm and navigated a chaotic situation with a clarity and efficiency that frankly outperformed his own security team, who were going to be hearing about that in a separate conversation. Gratitude was appropriate. Gratitude was manageable. He told himself this again the next morning, when he woke up and his first coherent thought was not the quarterly review or the pharmaceutical merger or the 3 emails from his legal team marked urgent. It was the image of a woman crouching down to his son's level, speaking in the unhurried, warm way that meant she was not performing kindness but simply practicing it. He told himself this a third time when he called his assistant before 8 o'clock and asked her to identify the corporate ownership structure of Lotte World Mall. His assistant, who had worked for him for 6 years and possessed the diplomatic skills of a senior UN negotiator, said, "Of course, Chairman. Is there a particular reason?" "Due diligence," he said. "For a potential acquisition." "For a visit," he said, and ended the call before she could ask a follow-up question that he did not have a suitable answer for. He was a very good liar. He was lying to himself with impressive dedication. The due diligence, as he had called it, took 48 hours. What he discovered in those 48 hours was instructive. The mall was managed by a mid-sized retail group whose HR systems were, frankly, badly organized. Kiosk staff turnover was high. Supervisor accountability was low. There was a particular individual, a floor supervisor by the name of Park Jun-seo, whose staff complaint record was, to put it in the most professional terms available, extraordinary. 14 complaints in 3 years. 14. From 7 different employees. 3 of those complaints had been filed by a woman who had been employed for 8 months, whose performance reviews were consistently excellent, and whose complaint filings were written with the precise, chronological, fully documented specificity of someone who had grown up understanding that the world required receipts. He read all 3 of them. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the Seoul skyline through 60 square meters of floor-to-ceiling glass and felt something that he normally kept in a very orderly containment system making a small but structurally significant attempt to escape. It was not merely anger, although anger was present. It was something more specific. The particular heat that arrives when you learn that someone when you learn that a person of obvious quality has been systematically diminished by someone of obvious smallness, and that this has been happening for months, in plain sight, while absolutely nothing was done about it. He called his head of corporate acquisitions. "I'd like to explore a strategic partnership with Lotte World's management group," he said. "Start with a quiet preliminary conversation. Frame it as infrastructure interest. And pull all available data on their operational management structure first." Understood. Timeline. "Yesterday," he said, which was how he communicated that something was important without technically saying that something was important. He ended the call. He told himself this was a business decision. The skyline did not visibly react, but it had the energy of something that knew better. The first thing changed on a Monday. Chidera arrived at the mall for her morning shift, scanned her badge, walked to the kiosk, and found the duty roster for the week printed and posted on the staff notice board. Her name was in a different column. She blinked at it. For 8 months, Park Jun-seo had assigned her the worst combination of shifts with the mechanical reliability of a man who understood exactly how inconvenience functioned as punishment. Weekend doubles. Late closings followed by early openings. The Friday evening shift that ended at 10 and the Saturday morning shift that began at 7, which required a level of optimism about public transport that Chidera had never possessed. This week's roster showed her on Level 2. Level 2 was better. Significantly better. Better light, steadier foot traffic, closer to the staff room, closer to the bathroom, closer to the one vending machine in the building that stocked the honey citrus drink she had been using to get through winter. Also, notably, further from Mr. Park. "Did you request a transfer?" her co-worker Sian asked, appearing at her shoulder with the specific energy of someone who had already read the roster 3 times. "I did not request a transfer," Chidera said. "Did someone request it for you?" "That is not how transfers work." "Chidera." Sian pointed at the roster with a pen. "Park changed your assignment. Park, who once wrote you up because your kiosk light was 1 degree too bright. Park, who rescheduled your break to 11:45 specifically because he knew you prefer 12. That Park changed your assignment voluntarily to the good floor." Chidera looked at the roster for a long moment. "Maybe he is turning over a new leaf," she said. Sian stared at her. "Maybe," Sian said, in the tone of someone who believed this approximately 0%. "Someone turned the leaf for him." Chidera filed this under things she was not going to examine right now and went to find her new kiosk. The second thing happened 11 days later. The overorder. It had been a problem since September, a stock discrepancy in the accessories inventory, for 100,000 Korean won's worth of items that existed on the system but not on the shelves, which somehow in the accounting of Mr. Park's department had been assigned as Chidera's responsibility despite the fact that she had been on approved leave when the original order was placed. She had filed a count report. She had attached every document she possessed. She had written the thing in the kind of language that her cousin Adiz back in Abuja, who was a lawyer and terrifying, had coached her to use on a video call that lasted 2 hours. The counter-report had been received, acknowledged, and subsequently ignored for 6 weeks in the particular way that institutional bureaucracy ignores things it finds inconvenient. The 400,000 Korean ones had been sitting in her file like a small, persistent storm cloud, waiting to become a deduction. On a Thursday morning, she received an email from the Mall Central Finance Department. Following an internal audit review, a system error in the September ordering process has been identified and corrected. No deductions will be applied to affected staff accounts. We apologize for any inconvenience. Chidera read the email. She read it again. She read it a third time, looking specifically for the part where it told her what had triggered a sudden audit review of a 6-week-old discrepancy that had been perfectly comfortable being ignored until this exact week. That part was not in the email. She sat with this for a long moment. Then she opened her phone and typed into the search bar, Kang Hyun Woo, KH Group. The results loaded immediately. Forbes Korea. Pharmaceutical conglomerate. Real estate holdings. 3 consecutive years as one of Korea's most influential executives. 35. No public romantic history following the death of his wife 4 years ago. She looked at the search results for a long time. Then she typed, underneath, KH Group, Corporate Partnerships, Lotte World Mall. What came back was a press release dated 9 days ago. Early-stage strategic partnership discussions between KH Group and the management company that operated Lotte World Mall. 9 days ago. She put her phone face down on the kiosk counter. Unbelievable, she said, to the kiosk, to the mall, to the general concept of powerful men making large decisions about situations they had decided to care about. The kiosk did not respond. It was a kiosk. It had more sense than to get involved. She saw him on a Tuesday. She had not been looking for him. This was important to establish, because she was a practical woman with a healthy relationship to reality, and she was not the kind of person who spent her working hours scanning upper floors for Korean executives in dark coats. She was doing inventory. She had her clipboard. She was counting anklets, specifically, because Seyun had reorganized the anklets again in a system that appeared to be based on emotional resonance rather than any conventional retail logic, and Chidera was attempting to reconstruct the original order from memory. She looked up to rest her eyes. Level 4. The walkway above the atrium. Partially behind a support pillar, not fully behind it, which meant either he did not particularly care if he was seen or he was genuinely on his phone and happened to be standing there and she was constructing a narrative from coincidence. He was on his phone. He was also looking down. Not at the general mall. Not at the atrium fountain or the shoppers or the promotional display that had been installed overnight featuring an oversized inflatable chicken that nobody had explained and everyone was quietly confused by. He was looking at the kiosk. He was looking at her. Their eyes met across the full height of the atrium, across the noise and the movement and the inflatable chicken, and for one moment neither of them moved. He did not pretend he had not been looking. He did not glance away with the performative casualness of a person caught doing something they intended to keep private. He held her gaze directly, steadily, with the same quality of attention she had clocked in him when they stood at the fountain and he had said thank you and meant it larger than the word. Then his phone moved at his ear, and someone on the other end of the call apparently said something that required a response, and he turned away and walked toward the upper floor corridor and was gone. Chidera stood very still. She had questions. She had several questions, and they were arranging themselves in her mind in the orderly, methodical way that her questions always arrange themselves, because she was not a chaotic person and she did not do well with information she had not yet properly sorted. Question 1. How many times had he been here? Question 2. Was the mall partnership connected to her specifically, or was she assembling meaning from separate coincidences like a person constructing a conspiracy board with insufficient string? Question 3. If it was connected, what exactly was she supposed to do with that information, given that the man in question was a Forbes career executive and she was currently counting anklets on level 2? She had no good answers to any of these questions. She counted the anklets. There were 4 more than there should have been, which meant Seyun had added to the inventory without updating the system again, which was a whole separate problem. She focused on the anklet problem. The anklet problem was manageable. He came back on Thursday, and again on the following Monday. She didn't see him both times. She inferred the Monday visit from the fact that the inflatable chicken, which had been causing a quiet but persistent crisis among the Level 1 promotional staff for 5 days and which several people had filed informal complaints about, was removed that morning and replaced with a tasteful autumn flower arrangement that nobody had ordered. She chose not to examine what it meant that she was now tracking his presence by changes in the mall decor. On Wednesday, Eun-woo appeared. She was with a customer, a woman trying to decide between 2 pairs of earrings with the focused deliberation of someone negotiating international trade, when she heard it. A small voice. Very close. Very certain. Chidera. The customer looked up. Chidera turned. Kang Eun-woo was standing at the kiosk counter with his yellow dinosaur backpack and his ink-dark eyes and the particular self-possessed energy of a child who has arrived at a destination he planned and is satisfied with his navigation. Beside him stood a woman in her 50s, calm-faced, neat, with the practiced stillness of someone who had spent years in proximity to small children and important people and had learned to maintain equanimity around both. A nanny. Not the father. Chidera's customer made her earring decision, paid, and left with the brisk efficiency of someone who had correctly read that something more interesting was happening. Chidera crouched down. Eun-woo, she said. You came back. I told you I would come back, he said, with mild reproach, as though he found it slightly insulting that she might have doubted his word. I practiced your name every day. Do you want to hear? I would very much like to hear. He straightened to his full height, which, at 93 centimeters, required some commitment to the bit, and said, with perfect diction and considerable pride, Kaidara Igwo. That is exactly right, she said. That is flawless. He beamed. The smile was, again, completely different from his father's careful near-smiles. It was full and bright and deployed without strategy or reservation, the smile of someone who had not yet learned to ration joy. I practiced in the mirror, he confided. And also to Dol Dol. He is a good listener. He doesn't interrupt. Dol Dol is the penguin, Chidera remembered. Eun-woo's face lit up. You remembered Dol Dol. How could I forget someone that important? He would be happy, Eun-woo said, with great sincerity. He likes being remembered. APPA says we should always make people feel remembered. He says it is the most important thing you can do for someone. There was a brief pause while Chidera quietly rearranged several things she had been telling herself about Kang Hyun-woo and his motivations. Your APPA sounds very wise, she said carefully. He is very wise and also very busy, Eun-woo said, with the breezy acceptance of a child who had made his peace with the fact of life. He works very much. But he brought me here today, and he is parking the car, and he says he will come up when he is finished parking because the parking at this mall is, he paused, visibly recalling the exact phrasing, a national disgrace. Chidera pressed her lips together very firmly. The parking, she agreed, is deeply unreasonable. He said other words too, Eun-woo added, but Nanny Kim said those were not for me to repeat. The nanny, Nanny Kim, maintained her expression of complete professional serenity, but her eyes were warm. Is your APPA coming up? Chidera asked, keeping her voice entirely neutral and her face entirely professional and her hands entirely occupied with straightening a display that did not need straightening. He said 15 minutes, Eun-woo said. Then, with the lateral thinking of a small boy who had inherited his father's strategic mind without yet developing the discipline to conceal it, he also asked me this morning what you looked like. To describe you. He said he wanted to make sure he would recognize you. A beat of silence. Did he? Chidera said. I told him you looked like the good chocolates, Eun-woo said, and that you had very nice hair and you wore a name tag and you were the giraffe's best friend. He said that was helpful. I am sure it was, Chidera said. She straightened the display again. The display was now extremely straight. She could do nothing further for the display. She moved to the earrings. He did not come in 15 minutes. He came in 22, and Chidera knew this because she was absolutely not watching the escalator and had not been watching the escalator, and the fact that she looked up at the exact moment he stepped off it was entirely coincidental. He was not in a suit today. This was, she was not going to use the word unfair, but she reserved the right to think it. He was in a dark coat over a charcoal jumper, the kind of understated, expensive casual that some men made look effortless because it genuinely was effortless for them, and his hair was slightly less ordered than it had been at the fountain, as though the parking situation had required running a hand through it at least once. He looked like a man who had come to a mall on a Wednesday to visit a small boy's favorite giraffe and had not thought particularly hard about it. He looked more dangerous like this than he had in the suit. She didn't know why. She filed it firmly in the category of things she was not examining and kept her eyes on the earrings. APPA. Eunwoo announced, abandoning his post beside the kiosk and sprinting toward the escalator with the urgency of a search and rescue dog locating its target. Hyunwoo caught him without breaking stride, swinging him up to his hip with the automatic ease of a man who had been doing this for 4 years and no longer thought about the physics of it. Eunwoo wrapped both arms around his neck and immediately began talking. The parking, the escalator, Chidera's name which he had pronounced perfectly, Doldol's involvement in the preparation, the giraffe's continued reliability, all of it delivered in a single continuous stream that would have overwhelmed most adults. Hyunwoo listened to all of it. He asked 2 questions. He adjusted Eunwoo's backpack strap with his free hand. He looked up. "Hello," he said. "Hello," she said. This was, objectively, a completely unremarkable exchange of greetings between 2 adults. It was 2 syllables each. It contained no information. There was no logical reason for it to land the way it landed. She blamed acoustics. The mall had unusual acoustics. "I apologize for the delay," he said. "The parking is a national disgrace," Chidera supplied. He looked at Eunwoo. Eunwoo looked at the ceiling with the innocent expression of a child who had absolutely not repeated anything. "He tells me things," Chidera said. "He tells everyone things," Hyunwoo said. "I have stopped having any phone calls within his hearing that I would not be comfortable with Halmoni knowing about. It has simplified my schedule considerably." She laughed. It arrived before she had the chance to manage it. A real, unedited laugh, the kind she kept on a shorter leash around people she had not yet decided she trusted. Something happened to Hyunwoo's face. Very briefly. The kind of change that registered in the eyes before the rest of the face knew what to do with it. A flash of warmth so unguarded that she suspected he had not intended her to see it. He cleared his throat. "Eunwoo would like to visit the giraffe," he said, returning to safe ground with the efficiency of a man who was good at returning to safe ground. "The giraffe is where he has always been," she said. "Reliable as ever." "Can you come?" Eunwoo asked, leaning around his father's shoulder to fix her with the full force of his attention. "To the giraffe. With us. You can tell him hello from me. You said you are his friend. Friends should visit together." "I am working," she said. "Your kiosk is right there," Eunwoo said, pointing at it with accurate geometry. "You can see it from the giraffe. You would not even be far." "He has a point," Hyunwoo said, and there it was again, that shadow of a smile, living in the corner of his mouth, careful about how far it came out. "Your son," Chidera informed him, "is a menace." "He is," Hyunwoo agreed. "He gets it from his grandmother." She stepped around the kiosk counter. Soo-yeon, who had appeared from the staff corridor at some point in the last 5 minutes and had clearly been watching all of this with undisguised delight, gave Chidera a look that contained an entire essay. Chidera gave her a look back that said, "Say nothing." Soo-yeon mouthed, "He is very tall." Chidera walked to the giraffe. They stood in front of it, the 3 of them, Eunwoo in the middle, between his father and Chidera, with the satisfied energy of someone who had arranged exactly the situation he wanted and was now simply enjoying the execution. The giraffe blinked. Every 45 seconds, Eunwoo confirmed, to his father. "She told me. She has watched him for 2 years. They have an understanding." "An understanding," Hyunwoo repeated, glancing at Chidera. "We respect each other's consistency," she said. "He blinks on schedule. I arrive on time. We are kindred spirits." Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment. Then, "How long have you been in Seoul?" The shift in register was smooth, casual, not interrogatory, the kind of question you ask someone you are talking to rather than interviewing. She registered the smoothness and decided to accept it. 3 years, she said. "I came for a language program. I stayed because," she paused, genuinely considering this, "because I had started something and I don't leave things unfinished, even when the thing is harder than I initially calculated." "What was harder than you calculated?" "Everything," she said, with the cheerful honesty of someone who had made peace with a difficult truth. "The language. The winters. The food. In the beginning, I made the mistake of telling a colleague that Korean food was not spicy enough and she looked at me like I had said something offensive about her grandmother. I have since corrected my position. The food is excellent. I was simply calibrated differently. He looked at her for a moment. You recalibrate. It is what you do when the environment requires it. You pay attention, you adjust, you continue. Another pause. He seemed to be filing this. What are you studying? The language program. I completed it. I am now preparing for the topic level 6. It requires a great deal of preparation. Level 6, he said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't fully name, a kind of recalibration of his own. That is the highest level. It is. I like finishing at the top. Eun-woo looked up at his father. APPA, Chidera is excellent at things. I can see that, Hyun-woo said. I told you she was impressive. You told me she looked like the good chocolates. Both things are true at the same time, Eun-woo said, with enormous patience. That is called nuance. Halmoni told me. The sound that came out of Chidera was not dignified. It was a full, helpless laugh that she made absolutely no attempt to suppress, and it startled a nearby couple who turned to look, and she did not care even slightly. Hyun-woo was smiling. Not the shadow of a smile. Not the structural suggestion of one. An actual smile, brief, real, arriving and departing quickly as though it was still getting used to the trip, but present and unmistakable, and it rearranged his entire face in a way that was thoroughly, unreasonably, inconveniently devastating. She looked back at the giraffe with great urgency. The giraffe blinked. She had never been so grateful for the giraffe in her life. He asked for her number before they left. He did not ask the way men usually asked, casually, confidently, performing an ease they may or may not feel. He asked the way he appeared to do most things, directly, without decorative language, with a quality of attention that made the question feel considered rather than impulsive. I would like to be able to contact you, he said, while Eun-woo was engaged in a farewell conversation with the giraffe that had been going for 3 minutes and showed no sign of concluding. To check that things are well. If that is acceptable to you. To check that things are well, she repeated. Yes. Not for any other reason. A pause. There may be other reasons. I am being honest about that. But I am also not interested in. I don't want to. He stopped. She watched him, a man who spoke with precision in every professional context, quietly take apart and rebuild a sentence because the first version wasn't right. I would like to know that you're all right. That is the primary reason. Anything else is, I would like to have your permission before anything else. She looked at him for a long moment. Everything her practical mind said on the subject was true. He was Kang Hyun-woo of KH Group. She was Chidera Egwoo of Kiosk 7, currently level 2. These were not coordinates that typically intersected. But she had also grown up with a mother who said, do not let the size of a thing convince you that you are not the right size to receive it. She gave him her number. He entered it into his phone with the same methodical focus he appeared to apply to everything, and then, to her absolute astonishment, he typed a message immediately and sent it, so that her phone buzzed in her apron pocket before he had even put his own away. She looked at it later, when they had gone. It said, this is Kang Hyun-woo. I wanted to make sure it was right. She stared at the message for a considerable amount of time. Then she typed back, it is right. A response came in under 60 seconds. Good. And then, after a brief pause that felt longer than it was, I will be in touch. Chidera set her phone down. She looked at Seyun, who had been watching all of this from the kiosk with the focused attention of someone live-streaming an event to their internal monologue. Not a word, Chidera said. I haven't said anything, Seyun said. You are saying many things with your face. My face is neutral. Your face has never been neutral in your life, Seyun. Seyun considered this. He smiled at you. Literally everyone in this section saw it. Kim from the snack kiosk is going to talk about it for weeks. We were talking. People smile when they talk. Chidera. That man looked like he forgot smiling was something he was allowed to do, and then you laughed and he remembered. Chidera picked up her inventory clipboard. Count the anklets, she said. There are still 4 extra, Seyun said. The anklets have not changed. You, however. The anklets, Chidera said firmly, and began counting bracelets with the focused determination of a woman who absolutely had everything under control. The third thing changed that Friday. She was on her break, sitting in the staff room with her honey citrus drink and her topic vocabulary flashcards, when her phone buzzed. She expected Si-yeon, who had been sending her updates about the Kim from the snack kiosk situation with increasing frequency. It was not Si-yeon. It was the number saved as Kang Hyun-woo. She sat up. The message read, "I have been informed that your supervisor filed a formal performance complaint against you with HR. On the matter of the incident last month, the child. I want you to know before you receive any communication from the department." She stared at the screen. The honey citrus drink went untouched. The flashcards were forgotten. Mr. Bark. Of course. She had been waiting for it. The deferred humiliation. The bill presented at the worst possible moment. He had been quiet for 3 weeks, which she should have known meant he was not finished, merely reloading. She typed, "How do you know about a complaint that was filed in my company's HR department?" The response took slightly longer this time. From a new angle. He picked up his phone. He reread the message. "Good night, Hyun-woo." He put his phone down. He stared at the ceiling and told himself with great firmness that he was a composed, rational, operationally excellent individual who did not get unsettled by a good-night text from a woman he had met 11 days ago. He was unsettled. He was also, somewhere underneath the unsettled, something else. Something that felt, cautiously, like the first honest warmth he had let himself feel in 4 years. He did not examine it. Not yet. But he did not lock it back up either. That was the difference. Nobody warned Chidera Egwu that falling for someone would look exactly like babysitting their child, receiving lunch she never ordered, and losing an argument to a 4-year-old about the emotional needs of a stuffed penguin. Here is what Chidera knew about herself, going into the 3rd week of knowing Kang Hyun-woo. She was sensible. She had always been sensible enough to pack her bags and move to a country where she did not initially speak the language, sensible enough to survive 3 Seoul winters on a budget that required creative accounting, sensible enough to document every workplace grievance in a notes app with timestamps and supporting details, which her cousin Adiz back in Abuja called being thorough and Mr. Bark called being difficult, and which Chidera simply called being prepared. She was not, and had never been, the kind of woman who lost her head over man. She had observed this phenomenon in others and found it intellectually interesting the way one found where the system's intellectually interesting. Notable, occasionally dramatic, not personally relevant. She was reconsidering this position. Not dramatically. Not in the way of someone who had abandoned all reason and thrown their carefully organized life into the air to see where the pieces landed. More in the way of someone who had built a very sensible fence and was now noticing that a door had appeared in it, and that the door was open, and that on the other side of it was a tall man who sent good morning texts with the regularity of someone who had made a decision and was implementing it methodically. He was very methodical about the good morning texts. They arrived at 7:43 every morning. Not 7:40. Not 7:45. 7:43, which she had eventually realized was the exact time she clocked in for her morning shifts, which many had either asked someone or remembered it from something she had mentioned once in passing, and either option was, she was not going to use the word devastating. She was going with notable. The texts themselves were not elaborate. They were not flurried or performative. They were just present. A question about whether the topic preparation was going well. A dry observation about something in the news that he thought she might find interesting, which she always did. Once, a photograph of Eun-woo asleep with Dol-Dol balanced on his head, captioned simply, "He claims this is comfortable." I have no evidence to contradict him. She had looked at that photograph for an embarrassing amount of time. She was a sensible woman. She was also completely done for, and the sooner she acknowledged it to herself the sooner she could decide what to do about it. The lunch situation started on Monday. She had been on her break, sitting at the small table in the staff room with the container of jollof rice she had made on Sunday. She cooked on Sundays, a habit from home that she maintained because it was economical and because the smell of tomatoes and palm oil and the particular spice combination her mother had taught her was the closest thing to enigu that existed in her Seoul apartment, when Nanny Kim appeared in the doorway. Chidera stared at her. Nanny Kim gave a small, composed bow. "Miss Chidera. I have a delivery." "A delivery," Chidera repeated. "From Chairman Kang." What Nanny Kim produced from the insulated bag she was carrying was a meal from a Korean restaurant that Chidera recognized immediately because she had mentioned it exactly once, in a text, 11 days ago, when Hyun-woo had asked her what she would eat if she could eat anything in Seoul that was not from her own kitchen. She had named this restaurant as a joke, essentially. It was the kind of place that required reservations 6 weeks in advance and had a private dining room that celebrities used when they did not want to be seen being human in public. He had sent her their doenjang jigai, in a proper thermal container, with a small folded note tucked under the lid. She unfolded the note. It said, "You mentioned this place. You also said you had never been because the reservation list was unreasonable. I agree the reservation list is unreasonable." This seemed like a simpler solution. She stared at the note. She stared at the soup. The soup smelled extraordinary. She picked up her phone and typed, "You sent a nanny with restaurant soup to my staff room." His reply arrived in 40 seconds. "I sent a nanny with excellent restaurant soup to your staff room. The distinction matters." She typed, "This is excessive." His reply, "The reservation list has a 4-month wait." This was faster. She typed, "That is not the point." His reply, "What is the point?" She looked at this question for a moment. Then she typed, "I don't know yet. But I will tell you when I figure it out." A pause. Then, "That is fair. Enjoy the soup." She ate the soup. It was, without meaningful competition, the best thing she had consumed in 3 years in Seoul. Soo-yeon appeared in the doorway 3 minutes later, looked at the thermal container, looked at Chidera, and said, "Was that from the place with the 6-week waiting list?" "For months," Chidera said. Soo-yeon sat down across from her without being invited. Then she said, "I need you to tell me everything that is happening in your life right now. From the beginning. Leave out nothing." "I am eating my lunch, Soo-yeon." "You are eating a 80,001 lunch that a nanny delivered to a staff room," Soo-yeon said. "That is not lunch. That is a declaration." Chidera considered arguing with this and decided her energy was better spent on the doenjang jigai. "The anklets still need counting," she said. "The anklets," Soo-yeon said, "can wait." Eunwoo's visits became a fixture. This was not something that had been formally arranged. It had happened the way things happen when a 4-year-old has decided something should exist, through the sheer cumulative force of wanting it, applied consistently, until the universe reorganized itself around the wanting. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Nanny Kim would arrive at level 2 with Eunwoo in tow, and the boy would go directly to Chidera's kiosk with the purposeful energy of a man arriving at his club. He would install himself on the small stool behind the counter. She had found the stool in the storage room and placed it there without examining why, and he would proceed to narrate his day, interrogate the customers with questions they had not anticipated, and offer his personal opinions on the merchandise with the candor of a small consultant. "These earrings are very long," he told a customer one Thursday, pointing at a pair of chandelier earrings she was considering. "I think if you move your head fast they will hit you." "That seems like a problem." The customer looked at the earrings. She looked at Eunwoo. "He has a point," she said, and put them back. "He does this," Chidera told her, apologetically. "He should work in retail," the customer said, and bought a shorter pair. Eunwoo watched this transaction with the satisfaction of a job well done. "I helped," he told Chidera. "You absolutely did," she confirmed. "Can I have a commission?" "You are for." "I am for and I helped," he said. "Both things are true at the same time." "That is not how commission works." "How does commission work?" "It is complicated." "Tell me the complicated version." She looked at him. He looked back at her with his father's eyes and his mother's stubbornness, which she was inferring from the complete absence of any evidence that Hyun-woo possessed it. She explained commission. He listened with complete attention. He then explained to her why, based on her definition, he had technically earned one. She gave him a sweet from the small bowl she kept behind the counter. He accepted it as his professional due. The afternoons with Eunwoo were genuinely, unexpectedly, structurally good for her in a way she had not anticipated and could not entirely explain. He was curious about everything in a way that had not yet been organized into categories of important and unimportant. He asked her why some earrings had hooks and some had studs, and whether earrings felt lonely when they were separated from their pair. He asked her how far away Nigeria was and whether you could see it from an airplane window and whether she missed it. When she said yes, the way you miss something that is part of you even when you are happy where you are, he considered this with seriousness and said, "I miss my Ioma like that. I never met her, but I miss her like she is part of me." "Is that how it works?" Chidera had set down the bracelet display she was straightening and looked at this boy for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly how it works. You described it perfectly." He nodded, as though this confirmed something he had suspected. Then, "APPA misses her too, but he doesn't say it. He gets quiet instead." I know the quiet because it sounds different from his normal quiet. His normal quiet is calm. The missing quiet is, he made a small gesture with his hand, a compression, as though describing something folded tightly inward. I understand that kind of quiet, Chidera said. Do you have it? Sometimes. About things I miss. About things I want that I haven't figured out how to reach yet. Unwoo thought about this carefully. Then, APPA has less of the quiet lately. Since we started visiting you. I notice things, he added, with a matter-of-fact pride that was so precisely his father's that she had to look at the counter for a moment to compose herself. Halmoni says I have good noticing. She says it is a gift. Halmoni is right, Chidera said. She usually is, he agreed. APPA says she is right about everything except his haircut, but I think she is right about that too. Chidera made a sound that was officially a cough and definitively a laugh. Don't tell him I said that, Unwoo said, with sudden alarm. It is already forgotten, she promised. He relaxed. Thank you. He is sensitive about the haircut. Hyunwoo always came to collect him at 4:30. This was not something she had anticipated becoming the best part of her Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and she was going to continue not acknowledging that it had become exactly that, because she was a sensible woman and sensible women did not restructure their internal hierarchy of what constituted a good day based on whether a particular man arrived at their kiosk at precisely 4:30. He always arrived at 4:30. And every time, without variation, he came bearing something small. Considered. Something that required paying careful attention to another person in order to know it was the right thing. The second Tuesday, he arrived with a specific brand of groundnut that she had mentioned once, in passing, in a text at 11:30 at night, was the closest thing she had found in Seoul to the groundnuts her uncle sold at the Ogbeat market in Enugu. She had not expected it to be retained. He handed her the bag without ceremony. I found a Nigerian grocery near Itaewon, he said. I wasn't sure if these were the right ones. She looked at the bag. She looked at him. How did you find a Nigerian grocery in Itaewon? I looked, he said, which was such a simple answer that it sat in the air between them doing very complicated things. You went to Itaewon, she said. I sent someone initially, he admitted. But the first report was not specific enough, so I went myself. Hyunwoo. They are either the right ones or they are not. I wanted to know which. She opened the bag. The smell reached her before anything else, that exact, irreplaceable smell of home that exists in specific foods and refuses to be approximated, that smell that lives in a different part of your brain than ordinary memory, in the part that does not translate. She looked down at the bag for a moment. They are correct, she said, when she trusted her voice. Good, he said simply. Unwoo looked between them with the attentive curiosity of a small person watching adults do something he didn't have the full vocabulary for yet but instinctively understood was important. Can I have one? He asked. No, Hyunwoo and Chidera said together, with identical timing. Unwoo looked profoundly unbothered. I will try again next week, he announced, and went back to reorganizing the anklet display in a system Chidera was going to have to undo later but that she discovered she did not particularly mind. The Thursday of the third week, it rained. Not the polite, navigable Seoul rain that arrived in light curtains and departed before it became inconvenient. This was rain with an agenda, heavy, sideways, the kind that made outdoor existence feel like a personal affront. By mid-afternoon, the mall was fuller than usual and Chidera's kiosk had been busy in the continuous, slightly breathless way that came with unexpected crowds. Unwoo arrived at 3:30 instead of the usual time, which meant he had burned through his standard conversational material by the time he installed himself on his stool. I am bored, he announced. You have been here for 4 minutes, Chidera said. It has felt longer. What would you like to do? He considered this with the gravity it deserved. Tell me a story. A Nigerian story. From your home. APPA says every place has its own stories and the best way to know a place is to know its stories. She looked at him. Your father said that. He says many good things, Unwoo confirmed. He is quiet but when he talks it is usually important. Nanny Kim says he is the kind of person whose words count because he does not waste them. He paused. Do you think that is true? Yes, she said, before she had decided to. I think that is exactly true. Unwoo nodded, satisfied. Then, so, the story. She told him about Tortoise. The tortoise who was clever and greedy and always outsmarted himself, who invited himself to the sky feast and was carried by all the birds and ate everything and renamed himself All of You, so that when the food was announced as being for all of you he consumed the entire feast alone, and paid the price when the birds flew home without him and left him to fall back to earth and crack his shell on the way down. Unwu listened with his chin in both hands and his eyes enormous. "That is why tortoises have cracked shells," he said, when she finished. "That is the story my grandmother told me," she said. "Whether it is true or not depends on how you read truth." "I think it is true," he said, with complete conviction. "I think Tortoise was greedy and he paid for it, and the crack is the proof. The crack is the story living in his body." She stared at him. "Unwu, you are 4 years old." "I will be 5 in March," he said, as though this explained everything. "How are you like this?" "Halmoni says I am an old soul," he said, with zero embarrassment. "She says some people arrive in the world already knowing things. I think I learned them from my Ioma before I was born. She must have known many things." Chidera's throat did something it was not supposed to do in a professional context. "She must have," she managed. "Tell me another one," Unwu said. "About the tortoise. What did he do next?" She told him another one. And then another. She was midway through the third story, the one about Tortoise attempting to steal the secret of music from the sky, when she became aware of a presence at the edge of the kiosk that was not a customer. She looked up. Hyenwu was leaning against the kiosk partition with his arms folded, and the expression of a man who had been standing there for some time and had made a deliberate decision not to interrupt. His coat was slightly damp at the shoulders from the rain. His face was, she searched for the word and arrived at, open. More open than she had ever seen it in a public space, where he usually wore a quality of composed attention that was warm but managed. Right now he was not managing it. He was just watching her tell his son a story, and his face was doing something that had no business being visible in a shopping mall on a rainy Thursday afternoon, and she was going to need a moment. APPA. Unwu announced, with the irritation of someone whose narrative has been interrupted. Chidera was telling me about Tortoise. He stole music from the sky, but she hasn't finished yet. We cannot leave. I wouldn't dream of it, Hyenwu said, and he pulled the second stool, the one Chidera kept for Siyun during slow hours, from behind the counter and sat down on it without asking, with the ease of a man who had decided he belonged in a space and was done performing uncertainty about it. Chidera looked at him. He looked back at her with a question in his eyes. Is this all right? She finished the story about Tortoise. Unwu applauded with both hands. Hyenwu did not applaud, but he was smiling the full smile, the real one she had first seen at the giraffe, and it was rearranging his entire face in the way that only that particular smile could, taking him from a man who managed the world to a man who was simply in it, present and undisguised and thoroughly, inconveniently there. "You are an extraordinary storyteller," he said. "My grandmother was better," she said. "Tell me about her sometime." Something shifted in her chest, the recognition of it, the fact that she was sitting in a Seoul mall on a rainy Thursday passing her grandmother's stories to a Korean 4-year-old, and that this felt less strange and more right than almost anything had felt in a very long time. It was Nanny Kim who eventually, gently, reminded Unwu that dinner existed and that Doldol had been alone since morning and was certainly wondering where everyone was. Unwu immediately underwent the personality shift that only the invocation of Doldol could produce, sudden galvanizing urgency, as though he had only just remembered a responsibility he had been neglecting. "Doldol is alone," he told Chidera, gravely. "You should go to him at once," she agreed, matching his gravity precisely. "I will tell him about Tortoise. He will love it. He is a good listener. He doesn't interrupt." He gathered his backpack, then stopped and turned back. "Chidera." "Yes." "Thank you for my story." He said it with the sincerity of someone who had learned that thank you was a word that required real meaning to function. "It was the best thing that happened today. And I also got to ride the escalator 4 times, so that is saying a great deal." "You are very welcome," she said. "Come back on Tuesday." "I will come back on Tuesday," he confirmed, as though sealing a formal agreement, and allowed Nanny Kim to lead him away. Hyenwu did not immediately follow. He stood at the kiosk for a moment after Unwu had disappeared toward the escalators, and Chidera occupied herself with rearranging a display that was already perfectly arranged and had been since Tuesday. "He talks about you every day," Hyenwu said. "He is very easy to be with," she said. "Not everyone finds him so." "He is," He has always been very much. He is extraordinary, she said. I mean that without any softening. He is genuinely one of the most remarkable people I have met in Seoul, and I am including adults in that assessment. Something moved across Hyun-woo's face that was quieter and deeper than the smile, something that came from a different place, something that had to do with a child who had arrived in the world the same morning his mother left it and who had been loved fiercely but also, perhaps, quietly worried about whether he was enough, whether the world would see him clearly. Thank you, Hyun-woo said. For that. It is just the truth. Some truths require someone to say them, he said. They don't become real until someone outside your own head confirms them. She looked at him. He was looking at her the way he had started looking at her in the last week, steadily, without the careful management she had initially observed, as though he had quietly decided that managing his expression around her was an effort with a lower and lower return. Can I ask you something? He said. You can ask me anything. I may not answer, but you can ask. The corner of his mouth moved. Eun-woo has started asking when Chidera is coming to our house, he said. Not if. When. He paused. I want to know how you feel about that. About him. About the shape of what this is. She set down the bracelet she had been pretending to examine. That is not a simple question, she said. I know. I am asking it anyway. She thought about it honestly, without decoration. I feel as though Eun-woo has decided something, she said, and that he is probably right, and that the only people who haven't caught up yet are the two adults in the situation. Hyun-woo was quiet for a moment. He has your grandmother's stories now, he said. He will not let them go. You understand that. I had already understood that, she said. And IU is that. Hyun-woo. Yes. Ask me what you are actually trying to ask me. A pause. The rain against the windows. A distant mall announcement about parking validation that neither of them registered. Are you all right with how much he is attached to you? Hyun-woo said. Because I need to be careful with him. He has already lost one person who was supposed to be permanent. I cannot let him. He stopped. Started again. I need to know that you are not going anywhere. Before he goes further. He stopped again. He was a man who did not leave sentences unfinished. She could see the effort of it in his jaw, the careful management of words that wanted to come out larger than he was ready to release them. She understood this. She understood it specifically. I am not going anywhere, she said. Not from Eun-woo. He has my grandmother's stories and I intend to finish giving them to him. That is not a small commitment and I do not make it lightly. She watched him take that in, the slow, careful way he received things that mattered, as though they needed to be placed somewhere specific rather than simply dropped. And the second part of the sentence? She asked. The one you didn't finish. He looked at her. Before I go further, he said, quietly. That was the rest of it. The atrium was loud with a rainy Thursday's worth of redirected soul. Somewhere below them a child was crying about something small. Somewhere above them the giraffe was blinking every 45 seconds for nobody in particular. I know, she said. You know. I have known for a while. I am just being careful too. We are both being careful, which is the right thing to be. It is also very inconvenient. He laughed. It arrived without warning, a real laugh, unguarded, from somewhere less controlled than his usual register, and it changed his entire face the way sunlight changes a room it enters for the first time. It lasted only a few seconds. But it left marks. That is accurate, he said, when it had settled. Inconvenient is accurate. Tell Eun-woo I will see him Tuesday, she said. He already knows, Hyun-woo said. He has it in his personal schedule. I saw him update it this morning. He has a personal schedule. He is 4 years old and he has a personal schedule, Hyun-woo said, with the tone of a man who has made complete peace with this fact. It is color-coded. Tuesday and Thursday are highlighted in yellow. He said yellow is the color of important things. She could not help it. She smiled, not the managed near smile she had been careful to offer in these interactions, but a full, real one that arrived from somewhere unhurried and simply stayed. He looked at it for a moment. Good night, Chidera, he said, quietly. Good night, Hyun-woo. He left. She watched him go, the particular straight-backed, measured walk of a man maintaining composure in a situation that was doing interesting things to his composure, until the crowd absorbed him and he was gone. Soo-Yun materialized at her elbow with the speed of someone who had been around a corner listening for the entire conversation. "He laughed," she said, in the reverent tone of someone reporting a sighting of something rare. "He did," Chidera agreed. "Kim from the snack kiosk is going to." "I know. She has already started." "Of course she has." Soo-Yun looked at her with the expression of a person who has witnessed a great deal and is barely managing not to say all of it. "Are you okay?" Chidera considered the question honestly. "Yes," she said. "Which is interesting, because nothing about this situation is simple and I am a woman who prefers simple. But yes, I am okay." "You like him?" "I am not discussing this." "You like him and you like his child and you told him you are not going anywhere." "Soo-Yun, I am just establishing the facts." "Count the anklets." "There are still 4 extra anklets, Chidera. There have been 4 extra anklets for 2 weeks. At some point we must confront the anklet situation." "Tomorrow," she said, and started closing down the kiosk with the brisk efficiency of a woman who needed to be busy for the next 30 minutes so that she did not stand in the middle of a mall and admit out loud that she was entirely, completely, and rather wonderfully in trouble. That night, at 8:17, later than the usual 7:43, which was notable, her phone buzzed. She picked it up. It was a photograph. Eun-woo, in pajamas, with Dol-Dol in his lap and a look of absolute theatrical outrage on his face. Beside the photo, a message. He is upset that Tortoise's story was interrupted before the music part was resolved. He says to tell you he requires the ending on Tuesday. He also says Dol-Dol agrees. I have been informed that Dol-Dol's opinion is decisive in this household. She laughed at her phone in her empty apartment, genuinely, fully, without editing at first. She typed, "Tell him Tortoise did steal the music but drop half of it on the way home, which is why some songs are happy and some songs are sad. He kept the halves separate and that is why music has moods." A pause. Then, "He says that is the most beautiful and also the most annoying answer he has ever received, and he needs you to know that Dol-Dol cried a little." He cried a little. Dol-Dol is managing. She read the bracket part twice. She typed back, "How are you managing?" The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Better than I expected," he wrote finally. "When I am being honest." She looked at those words for a long time in the quiet of her apartment, with the rain still tapping against the window and the Enugu groundnuts in a bowl on her kitchen counter and the particular feeling of a woman who had built an excellent, sensible, well-maintained life in a difficult city and was now discovering that some things, when they arrived correctly, did not disrupt a life so much as enlarge it. She typed, "Me too." She set the phone down. Outside, Seoul moved through its night in its relentless, indifferent, extraordinary way. Inside, Chidera Egwu sat in the warmth of something she had stopped calling adrenaline and had not yet found a better word for, but she thought, if she was being honest with herself, that the word might simply be, beginning. Here is what nobody tells you about falling in love with a man like Kang Hyun-woo. It does not arrive like lightning. It arrives like a Tuesday. And then a Thursday. And then a rainy afternoon, a bag of groundnuts from Itaewon, and a 4-year-old who has already planned the entire wedding and is simply waiting for the adults to catch up. The termination letter arrived on a Monday. Chidera found it in her staff locker at 7:50 in the morning, tucked between her spare uniform and the topic vocabulary book she kept there for slow shifts. It was printed on official company letterhead, cited a restructuring of kiosk staffing arrangements on level 2, and was signed by Mr. Bark with the precise flourish of a man who had been waiting a very long time to use this specific pen. She read it twice. Then she folded it precisely along its original crease lines, placed it in her bag, changed into her uniform, and went to open her kiosk. Soo-Yun found her there at 8:15, arranging the earring display with the focused, methodical calm of someone using manual tasks to keep their nervous system from doing something unproductive. "Chidera." "I know. He cannot just." "He already did," Chidera said. "It is done. The letter is official. 2-week notice period. Mr. Bark has been building toward this since October." "Then we go to HR. I went to HR in September. I went again in November. I have 3 months of documented incidents in a notes app with timestamps, and what I received each time was a very apologetic email that changed absolutely nothing." Soo-Yun went quiet. Her face did something complicated. the face of a person who wanted to offer comfort and was intelligent enough to know that comfort was not what was needed. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Chidera straightened the last earring on the display. She looked at the kiosk she had shown up for every day for 8 months, through reorganizations, arbitrary write-ups, the grinding exhaustion of being perpetually underestimated by someone who was also perpetually wrong about her. "I am going to fight it properly," she said. "My way. Not anyone else's way. Mine." She picked up her phone. She did not call Hyun Woo. She called Adiz. Adiz Egwu, barrister, Abuja, answered on the second ring with the energy of someone who had been expecting exactly this call. "Tell me everything," she said, in Igbo, before Chidera had finished opening her mouth. "How did you know it was bad?" "You only call me before 9 in the morning when something is bad and you need to be angry in your first language before you switch to being strategic." This was entirely accurate. Chidera told her everything. Adiz listened without interrupting, which was how you knew she was taking something seriously, because Adiz's natural state was interrupting. When Chidera finished, there was a brief, dense silence. "Send me the termination letter, all 3 complaint filings, the HR responses, and that notes app. All of it. Tonight," Adiz said. "This is a Korean labor matter. Your jurisdiction is not." "I have a colleague in Seoul, Kim Jae-won. She does exactly this. She is terrifying in the best possible way and she has not lost a wrongful termination case in 4 years. I am calling her in the next 10 minutes. A pause. "Ada. Do not say thank you to me. Say it when you win. You know I can handle this myself." "I know you can. I also know that you have been handling things by yourself for 3 years in a country where you built every support from scratch, and that asking for help is not the same as needing to be rescued. It means you are smart enough to use your resources." She paused. "Also, I want to destroy this man professionally through entirely legal channels. Let me have this." Chidera laughed, helplessly, in the way she could only laugh in Igbo. "Fine. I will send everything tonight." "Good. Now go sell some earrings and be magnificent. I will call you when I have Kim Jae-won confirmed." She hung up. Chidera felt something settle in her chest, not ease exactly, and not certainty, but the particular steady quality of a woman who knows what she is made of and has decided to use all of it. She had not called Hyun Woo. This was important to her. Not because she did not trust him. She had learned, over 6 weeks, that Kang Hyun Woo was precisely the kind of person you could trust with serious things. But there was a version of this story where she let someone else's power solve her problem, and she had not come to Seoul and built this life and passed 3 topic levels and documented every injustice in a timestamp notes app to become someone who was rescued. She texted him at noon. The message read, "Mr. Bach issued my termination this morning. I want you to know, and I also want you to know that I am handling it. My cousin is connecting me with a labor lawyer in Seoul. I am not asking you to fix this one. I need you to trust me with it." His reply came in 4 minutes. "I trust you completely. Tell me what you need from me, if anything." She typed, "I need you to be the person I call when it is over." A pause. Then, "I will be exactly that. I am not going anywhere." She read those last 4 words and felt them land in the exact place where she had said the same words to him, weeks ago, about Eun Woo. The echo was not accidental. Nothing Kang Hyun Woo did with words was ever accidental. She put her phone away and sold earrings for the rest of her shift with the focused, undefeated energy of someone who already knew how the story ended. The case took 11 days. Adiz's contact, Kim Jae-won, who was, as advertised, terrifying in the best possible way, a small precise woman who spoke in complete legal citations and had the energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed finding the structural weaknesses in other people's bad decisions, reviewed Chidera's documentation and described it as the most thorough self-compiled evidence file she had encountered in her entire practice. She filed a formal wrongful termination claim with the Labor Relations Commission before the week was out. Mr. Bach received notification on a Thursday. Chidera knew this because Siyun sent her 7 separate text updates over the afternoon, each more detailed than the last, culminating in a voice note in which Siyun described Mr. Bach's face when the HR manager appeared at his office door as, and these were her exact words, like a man who stepped confidently onto what he believed was solid ground and discovered it was one of those prank thin ice situations from a cartoon. Chidera replayed that voice note twice. On the 11th day, the settlement arrived. Full reinstatement. 8 months of back pay for every docked and shorted hour. A formal written apology from the company. Mr. Bark's removal from his supervisory position, pending a full internal review. A review that Kim Jae-won had ensured would have access to all 14 complaints on his file. Chidera read the settlement document from beginning to end without rushing a single line. Then she called Adiz. "We won," she said. Adiz made a sound that was not suitable for professional environments and entirely suitable for the occasion. Then Chidera called Hyun-woo. He answered before the second ring. "Tell me." "We won. Full settlement. He is gone." The silence on his end lasted 3 seconds. It was not empty. It was the silence of a man absorbing something that mattered to him enormously, managing just barely to keep the size of his reaction within the proportions of a phone call. "Chidera," he said, and that was all he said, and it was enough. "I know," she said. "Can I take you to dinner? Tonight. Not soup delivered by a nanny. An actual dinner, you and me at a table. Is the reservation list still 4 months long? I own a permanent table there. I have never used it. Hyun-woo. I purchased it during a charity fundraiser. Of course you did. 7 o'clock. I will come myself." "Then come yourself," she said. 7 o'clock. She heard him exhale, one long, slow breath, like something held for a very long time finally, completely released. That evening. He arrived at 6:58. Of course he did. Chidera opened the lobby door and found him on the front steps in the cold October air wearing a navy suit she had not seen before, precise, considered, the suit of a man who had chosen it specifically for this specific evening, holding a small bunch of flowers that were not roses, not lilies, not anything from the standard romantic gesture catalogue. They were proteas. Architectural, unusual, beautiful in the way of things that did not need to borrow beauty from anything else. He looked at her. She had made an effort. The dress was deep green. Her hair was up. She had spent 20 minutes on it and would deny this claim for the rest of her natural life. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 6 weeks, but tonight without any management. Fully, completely, with everything he had been keeping at a measured distance now simply present in his face because he had decided distance was no longer a project he was willing to fund. "You look," he started. "Do not make it strange," she said. "I was going to say extraordinary." "That is not strange. You may say that." He handed her the flowers. "These are proteas," she said. "I was told they were your mother's favorite," he said. "I asked Adiz." She went very still. "You called my cousin." "She called me first, actually, to thank me for the lawyer referral. She told me about the proteas in approximately the first 3 minutes, and I understood immediately that it was not incidental information." Chidera looked at the flowers. She looked at this man, who had gone to Itaewon himself to find the right groundnuts, who had texted at 7:43 every single morning, who had pulled a stool from behind her kiosk counter and sat on it without apology because he had decided he was done performing uncertainty about where he wanted to be. Something in her chest performed its final, definitive maneuver. "You are a lot," she said. "I have been told," he said. "I mean it as a compliment." "I know. I understood." They went to dinner. The restaurant was everything the soup had promised. Warm, precise, the kind of place where the lighting was designed to make everything feel like it was happening inside a painting. The table was in a corner. Private without being isolated. A candle had been lit because someone had been told they were coming. They talked for 3 hours. Not about business or settlements or corporate structures. They talked about the things that lived underneath all of that. He told her about Ji-yeon. He said her name carefully. The way you say the name of someone you love and have not stopped loving and have learned to love differently, not less but redirected, the way a river redirects when it meets something immovable and finds a path that is different from the old one but is still moving, still going somewhere. He said she was quiet and very funny in the way of people who are funny without trying to be. She liked thunderstorms. She read the last page of books first, which he found irrational and she found entirely practical, and they had argued about it every single time. He said, "She would have liked you." She liked people who knew what they were and did not apologize for it. He said, "I was angry for a long time afterward. Not at anyone specific. At the randomness of it. At the idea that you can do everything right and still lose the thing you cannot afford to lose." He said, "Eun-woo saved me. Not dramatically. In the daily sense. Someone needed me to get up, and get up I did, every morning, until getting up felt less like surviving and more like living again. He did not know he was doing it. He was simply hungry and curious and completely, relentlessly loud at 6 in the morning, and it turned out that was exactly what I needed. Chidera listened without filling the silences, because she understood the difference between a silence that needed filling and one that needed witnessing. When he finished, she told him about her father. About the man who left when she was 9 and her mother who had made akra for breakfast the next morning and said, "Some people leave a space when they go. Your job is not to shrink to fit the space. Your job is to grow until the space does not register anymore." She said, "I have been growing ever since. Sometimes into places that frighten me. A foreign country. A language I rebuilt from syllables. A job beneath what I was capable of, taken because it was available and I was building from the ground up, and there was no shame in the ground." She said, "I have not had many people who made me feel the ground was somewhere I could stop being and start rising from. You are one of the few." He looked at her across the candlelit table and said, with the careful weighted delivery of a man choosing the most important words he owned, "I would like to be that for you. For a very long time. If you will let me." "Ask me properly," she said. "That was." "It was close," she said. "But you are a man who does not leave sentences unfinished. So finish it." A pause. The corner of his mouth moved. Then the full smile arrived, the real one, the one that only existed in moments he had stopped managing, and underneath it was something older and quieter and far more permanent than the smile itself. He said, "Chidera Egwu. I have been trying to deserve the right to say this properly for 6 weeks. I am not a man who does things by halves, and I am not a man who says things he does not mean, so I need you to understand that every word of this is load-bearing." He said, "I am in love with you. I do not know exactly when it happened. I know it was somewhere between a giraffe display and a bag of groundnuts and a text at 11:30 at night, and I know that Unwu understood it before I admitted it to myself, which I am going to have to live with. I want you in my life. I want you at my table and in my corner, and I want to hear every story your grandmother gave you. I want to give you reasons to stay. Not because I need saving, and not because Unwu needs a mother, though he would very much like one, and he has expressed this to me, to Halmoni, to Nanny Kim, and to at least one security guard at this mall, but because I have spent 4 years being careful with everything and you are the first thing in 4 years that I want to be brave about." He said, "So. That is the finished sentence." The restaurant moved quietly around them. Chidera sat very still. Then she reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "One security guard," she said. He closed his eyes. He said, "Unwu told the security guard last Tuesday while I was parking the car. The guard said she seemed very nice. Unwu said yes, and also that she knows a giraffe personally, which is rare." She laughed. He opened his eyes. She was laughing across a candlelit table with her hand over his and the green dress and the proteas in the small vase the Maitre D had quietly placed them in, and he looked at her and thought, this specific thing. This is what I forgot was possible. Not happiness in the abstract, but happiness here, immediate, specific, hers and mine together happiness that existed in this exact table at this exact moment. When she stopped laughing, she looked at him with the steady, unhurried directness that was entirely hers. "I am in love with you too," she said. "I have been conducting a very thorough denial campaign about it for approximately 5 weeks, and it has failed completely. I want you to know that I do not lose many campaigns." "I know. That makes this more meaningful. I also want you to know that if you ever send a nanny with soup to my staff room again, I will consider it a romantic gesture and not an excessive one, because that soup was genuinely extraordinary." Noted. Permanently. She squeezed his hand. He turned his over and held hers, completely, with full intention, nothing halfway. He walked her to her building door at the end of the evening, and they stood in the cold air with the city lit up around them, and then he kissed her. It was not tentative. He was not a tentative man. It was the kiss of someone who had decided something and was fully committed to the decision, warm and unhurried, carrying in it the weight of 6 weeks of 7:43 texts and kiosk stools and rainy Thursday afternoons and groundnuts and a laugh that had changed his face and a laugh that had changed hers. When they separated, she looked at him. "You took your time," she said. "I wanted to get it right," he said. "You got it right," she said. He smiled. The real one. Unhurried. Permanent. 3 months later, a Sunday morning. The call from Halmoni came at 8 o'clock. Chidera was in Heinwu's kitchen making jollof rice, a project she had first undertaken the previous Sunday, which had produced in Eunwoo a response that could only be described as a spiritual awakening, culminating in him asking if he could be Nigerian, and Hyunwoo explaining that was not how it worked, and Eunwoo saying, "Then can Chidera teach me everything so I am the same on the inside?" The jollof rice had become a weekly appointment. Hyunwoo's phone buzzed on the counter. He looked at the screen. Something happened to his face that Chidera had learned to read over 3 months, the particular shift that meant harmony and also brace yourself. He answered. He listened. He said 3 words. He ended the call. "She wants to meet you," he said. "In Busan. This weekend. She says she has been patient for 3 months, which is more patience than anyone in this family has ever demonstrated, and she will not wait 1 day longer." She said all of that in 3 words. The first 2 words were "come to Busan." The third word was "now." Chidera turned back to the jollof rice and stirred it. "I am not afraid of your mother, Hyun-woo." "I know," he said. "I am slightly afraid of this meeting on your behalf, because when the 2 of you combine I believe the rest of us will need to find things to do in other rooms." She smiled at the pot. Eunwoo appeared in the doorway in his pajamas with Dol under one arm and the expression of a child who had heard the word Busan and processed its implications at considerable speed. "Are we going to see Halmoni?" he asked. "This weekend," Hyun-woo confirmed. "Is Chidera coming?" "Yes." Eunwoo's face went through something that the word happy did not adequately capture. It was bigger than happy. It was the face of a child for whom something that had been a hope had just been confirmed as a reality. The face of someone whose world had arranged itself into exactly the shape he had been quietly, persistently asking it to become. He walked to Chidera's side. He put his small hand on her arm. "Chidera," he said, very seriously. "Yes, Eunwoo. I am glad you sat with me at the giraffe." She looked down at him. At the comma birthmark, the ink-dark eyes, the foregoing on 40 quality of him that had undone her completely from the first 6 minutes of knowing him. "Me too, baby," she said. "Me too." Eunwoo nodded, satisfied, and went to set the table without being asked, because he had decided weeks ago that this was his contribution to Sunday mornings and he executed it with the seriousness of someone fulfilling a meaningful role. Hyun-woo came to stand beside Chidera at the stove. Not behind her. Beside her, parallel, so she could see him without turning, so she was never in the position of having to look around to find him. She had noticed this habit early. He had never mentioned it. She thought it was one of those things he had decided quietly, privately, as part of the continuous project of being the kind of person she deserved to stand next to. He was very good at the continuous project. "Chidera." "Yes." "There is something I want to ask you." "Now?" "While I am cooking." "The jollof will be fine for 2 minutes." "The jollof will not be fine for 2 minutes. It requires attention at this exact stage. Speak while I stir." A beat. He reached into the pocket of his Sunday morning shirt, the soft grey one, not a work shirt, the version of him that existed only in his own home, unhurried and unmanaged, and placed something on the counter beside the stove. She looked at it. It was a ring. Not a box. The ring itself, placed on the counter without ceremony or staging, in the manner of a man who had decided that the gestures that mattered were the ones that matched the person receiving them, and the person receiving this one was not a woman who needed spectacle, but a woman who needed truth, direct and undecorated. It was extraordinary. Rose gold. A design that was precise and unusual and nothing she would have selected from any catalogue, because it was better than anything she would have selected from any catalogue. She stopped stirring. "Hyun-woo." "I am not doing this on one knee," he said, "because I want to be beside you when I ask, not below you. That is not how I think of this. I think of this as standing beside you. For everything that comes after." She was looking at the ring. "I spoke to your mother 3 weeks ago by video call," he said. She cried. "I also nearly cried. We have agreed not to mention this to anyone." "You called my mother." "She called me first. Adiz gave her my number. Your family has a communication network that would make my entire logistics division envious." Chidera's eyes were doing something she was not going to acknowledge in front of the jollof rice. He said, "Chidera Egwu. God is doing great things. It is the right name for you and I have thought about it often. I want to build a life with you. Here. In this kitchen with Jollof on Sundays and Unwoo's schedule highlighted in yellow and Doldol's opinions and your grandmother's stories and everything that is already ours and everything we have not made yet. Will you marry me? It was not entirely a question the way he said it. It was the way he said most things, like a fact he was making available for her to confirm. She turned off the stove. She turned to him. He was watching her with the complete, focused attention that had been the first thing she ever knew about him, from the fountain. From the very first time he held her gaze across a crowded mall without blinking, the quality of being seen by someone who was actually looking, not constructing or projecting but seeing, accurately and entirely. Yes, she said. He put the ring on her finger with the care he put into everything. Steady hands, full attention, like something done once and meant to stay. She looked at it on her hand. Then she looked at him. He kissed her in the kitchen with the jollof cooling on the stove and Unwoo's footsteps audible from the dining room and the Sunday light coming through the window, and it was the kiss that had the full weight of everything behind it. 6 weeks of texts and groundnuts and storytelling stools and rainy Thursday afternoons and one careful, deliberate, impossibly sweet man who chose to stand beside her every single time. From the dining room came a small, extremely satisfied voice. I knew it, it said. I told Doldol and Doldol did not believe me, but I knew. I have always known. The twist. A letter from Lagos. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, 11 days after the ring. It bore the return address of a firm of solicitors in Lagos. It had been forwarded from Enugu to her sole address, meaning it had been in transit for at least 2 weeks, meaning whatever was inside had been decided before the ring, before the dinner, before most of the things that now constituted the shape of her life. She opened it at the kitchen table alone. She read it once. She read it again. She set it down and looked out the window at the Seoul skyline, at the city that had asked everything of her and was, apparently, not finished giving things back, and sat with what the letter contained for a long time. Then she called Adiz. Ada, she said. Did you know about this? A pause that was slightly too long. I found out last month, Adiz said. I was waiting for the right moment. There is a right moment to tell someone their grandfather left them a publishing company. Another pause. He left you the company because he said you were the only one in the family who understood that stories were infrastructure. A breath. His exact words. He said it the week he visited you in Enugu when you were 12 and you told him about the tortoise. He wrote it down. He kept that paper for 30 years, Chidera. Chidera sat very still. The publishing company was not enormous. It was not a conglomerate. It was a mid-sized independent press in Lagos that had been her grandfather's life's work for 4 decades. Built story by story, author by author, the press that had published 3 names now found in every African literature syllabus on the continent. It was also in significant financial difficulty. The solicitors had been trying to reach her for months. The board was waiting. The letter was marked urgent in 2 separate places. She thought about tortoise. About music dropped on the way home. About stories living in cracked shells. About a 12-year-old girl in Enugu who had told her grandfather about a greedy tortoise and been watched by an old man writing something down on a piece of paper he would carry for 30 years. She thought about the topic level 6 she had passed the previous month. About 3 years spent learning every register of a language, studying the space between what words said and what they meant. She thought about a man who had said, I want to be beside you for everything that comes after. She called Hyun Woo. He answered on the first ring. I need to tell you something. It is big. Tell me. She told him about the letter, about the publishing company, about Lagos and the board and the solicitors and her grandfather keeping a piece of paper for 30 years. When she finished, he was quiet for exactly the right amount of time. Then he said, Do you want it? She looked at the letter on the table. Yes, she said. I think I have wanted it since I was 12 and did not yet have the language for what I was wanting. Then we will make it work, he said. Seoul, Lagos, wherever the work takes it. We will make it work. You do not need to. Chidera. Steady. Warm. Absolute. I told you I wanted to be beside you for everything that comes after. This is something that comes after. Stop completing my sentences before I finish them. She laughed in the empty kitchen. You are a lot, she said. You told me that was a compliment. It still is. A pause. Then, quietly, go call the solicitors. I will be home by 6. Tell Un Woo. He is going to have opinions about the publishing company. He is for. He is 4 and he has opinions about everything, and his opinions are usually correct, which is something I am still adjusting to. She hung up smiling. She called the solicitors. She accepted. The wedding, a Saturday in February. They got married on a Saturday in February. Not a grand production. Chidera had been clear about this from the first conversation, and Hyun-woo had agreed with the speed of a man who had been hoping for exactly this but was not sure he was allowed to want it. A small ceremony, the people who mattered, the city that had given them to each other. Halmoni came from Busan and arrived 2 days early and spent both extra days in deep, delighted conversation with Chidera, confirming every suspicion Hyun-woo had ever had about what would happen when the two of them were finally in the same room. Adiz came from Abuja and brought Chidera's mother, who had video-called Hyun-woo twice since the engagement and called him son with the casual certainty of a woman who had made her decision and saw no reason to build suspense around it. Soo-yeon came and spent 40 minutes before the ceremony texting Kim from the snack kiosk updates of such extraordinary detail that Kim would later describe the entire thread as the most important news she had received in years. Kim Jae-won, the labor lawyer, attended as a guest and spent most of the reception looking professionally satisfied, which was exactly the right energy for a wedding where the bride had won a wrongful termination settlement 6 months prior. Nanny Kim cried from the very beginning of the ceremony and did not stop until well into the dinner, a fact she denied entirely when confronted about it and which everyone present pretended to believe. And Eun-woo. Eun-woo, who had been told 3 weeks before the wedding that Chidera was going to be his Ioma in the official, permanent, registered with the city sense of the word, had responded with a stillness so unlike his usual constant motion that Hyun-woo had crouched down immediately and asked if he was all right. Eun-woo had said, "I need to tell Dol-Dol." He had gone to his room. He was in there for 4 minutes. He came back with Dol-Dol under his arm and the expression of someone who had completed an important consultation and received the outcome he required. "Dol-Dol is very happy," he reported. "He says it is the best news since the jollof rice." On the day itself, Eun-woo stood between his father and Chidera at the front of the ceremony room wearing a small suit that was doing significant things to every person present, upright and grave and completely focused, the posture of someone who understood exactly what was happening and was honored to be this close to it. When the officiant asked if anyone had words, Eun-woo, who had not been scheduled to speak, who had prepared entirely on his own initiative, raised his hand. Hyun-woo made a sound. Chidera put her hand over her mouth. The officiant said, "Yes?" Eun-woo addressed the room. He said, "My name is Kang Eun-woo and I am 4 years old. I will be 5 in March. I want to say that I am very happy today because Chidera is going to be my Ioma. I know about Ioma because I think about her. I think she sent Chidera. I think she looked from heaven and she found the best person and she sent her to the giraffe on level 3 so that I would find her first and then APPA would find her after. I think Ioma had a plan. I just wanted everyone to know." He sat down. The room held its breath for 1 full second. Then Halmoni, from the front row, made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob and pressed both hands over her heart. Adiz was crying in the 3rd row without any effort to conceal it. Soo-yeon had both hands over her face. Nanny Kim had abandoned her earlier denial entirely. Hyun-woo was looking at the ceiling with the focused expression of a man at the absolute outer limit of his composure. Chidera crouched down. Right there, in front of the officiant and the flowers and everyone who had come to witness this, she crouched down to Eun-woo's level, the way she had at the kiosk, the way she had at the giraffe display on a Tuesday afternoon when a small boy had not yet told her his name, and she looked at him directly. "Eun-woo," she said, and her voice was steady because she had decided it would be steady, because this moment deserved steadiness. "I think your Ioma had excellent taste." He beamed. The full, open, unguarded smile she had first seen in a mall hallway, on a boy who had decided she was acceptable within 30 seconds of meeting her and had not changed his position once since. She straightened up. Hyun-woo took her hand. He was not looking at the ceiling anymore. He was looking at her, and his face was entirely, completely open, all 4 years of careful walls simply absent, as though Eun-woo's 30-second speech had quietly, finally, dismantled the last of them, and what remained was just this. A man who had loved a woman and lost her and had gotten up every morning for 4 years for the small loud hungry person who needed him, and who had looked up one day from a mall fountain to find a woman who had gone to his son before anyone asked her to, and had stayed.